Yes.
Just another question in the same vein as what you're talking about. When you're speaking to somebody who's either like the victim of a tragedy or very close to a tragedy, how do you balance sort of getting the story and the information with being like empathetic and compassionate and like how do you, like that sounds like a really difficult balance to have to strike, and
It
how
is.
do you navigate that?
I mean, you think of this, you have to approach people, strangers, and you have to get them to talk with you. You try to elicit information from them. That's all. I mean, you got to be compassionate about it. You got to be yourself. I had the pleasure years ago of meeting a very famous disc jockey in New York at WABC. And he was very popular. He was probably one of the best known. And a friend of mine was his board engineer. A board engineer in radio runs the board, the console for the disc jockey and the commercials and everything else, the jingles. So it was Dan Ingram. And so Dan was a big voiceover guy too, did a lot of commercials. So Dan said, "Kid, you want to know something?" He says, "You got to be yourself. You can't be anybody else." He goes, "This is me." He goes, "This is me in the studio, and this is me out of the studio. You get what you get." And it's like, that's true. You can't be anybody else. You have to use it's your own personality. It's however you are with people, how you communicate, how you approach people, or not approach people. Because there are times I won't bother. I'm not going to bother a family. No, you see, you can read body language. And then a lot of times I'll tell my boss they weren't available, which is true, because I didn't make that available, because I didn't want it to be. Let them be. Any other questions? Yes.
Excuse me. How much creative influence does your bosses kind of have, your employers? Do you get to kind of make your own, kind of chase your own stories? Do your employers kind of shut down any ideas that you have?
Every day they shut it down. It's like, you may, I'll come up with a list in the morning and present it to them and send it out to, it goes out to everybody. And someone will have input, or I'll make suggestions to others in the region. I know something else. Maybe it's in Norwalk, which was something this morning, or something in Danbury. I'll tell my other colleagues who work those areas. But yeah, I'll give a list, and then all of a sudden I get back, shortage of cleats. I'm like, okay. So, I mean, that's shutting it down. It's like, okay, we don't care what your list says. We want you to do this. I don't know what that's based on, but it's my boss. It's like, okay. I've challenged, unless I really believe in something, and that's worked to my favor too. I can't think of a story right off the bat, but I've suggested a story that's like, this is the greatest thing, and we've done it, and like, hey, that is a good story. Like, no shit. Other questions? Want to know about pay and salary? That kind of stuff?
Yeah.
It sucks.
Not good.
Go ahead.
Before we get into that, I have to address the elephant in the room.
Go ahead.
Which is that you have a great voice. So how much of that is God's given grace and how much of it is practice?
None of it's practice. Do you want to know the God's honest truth?
Sure.
Oh, I got this on. So, I went to a chiropractor. My daughter Meredith is now 40. Her friend who lives in Texas is a chiropractor, and he took an X-ray of my back. I know I have slight scoliosis, right, curvature of the spine, but I have missing vertebrae on one side and I have double on the other. So I have a straight vocal passage. That is why in college nobody ever beat me chugging a beer. I can down in 2 seconds. It would just go choo. It just went down. On my honeymoon in Martinique, 1979, there was a beer chugging contest. I won it hands down. I had free drinks all night. No, that.
So all we have to do is remove a couple of vertebrae?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So that's what he said, you know. And so I've been blessed with it. It's just something natural. And I've used it too. When I was at Sonalist, I can't tell you this because, and I'll deny saying it, but I was the voice of Navy training. Question? Somebody? Yes.
I was just gonna ask if you have any like aspirations to do like national news or work for like,
You know, there was back in the day, when I was 28, I was still in radio, I figured, had some friends in TV, and they said, if you're gonna do it, you don't wanna wait another 10 years and say, geez, I should have done it, you know? So, it was a sacrifice financially. But that Channel 8 job, he offered me less than what I was making as a news director at the local radio station. And I said to the guy, I said, I can't do that. I said, I have, you know, 2 little kids to feed, well, 1 at the time. And it's like, he came back a year later and said, okay, he upped the ante, you know. I think at the time was from $23,000 he offered me to like 31. So that was better than what I was doing at the time. So I took it in 1984. And then at the 84 that I had to join the union because everybody knows what a voiceover person is. I was the voice of Channel 8. So at the time, you know, you go into a booth, you read some copy. At a theater near you, check newspapers for showtime, stuff like that, right? That's the most I think I did, stuff like that. But that would pay, that was extra money to pay the bills. When I was doing narration for medical stuff and things like that, how much do you think I was getting paid an hour? How much do you think I had to bill an hour? Anybody take a guess? This is 20, what year is this? Okay. This
22.
is 25 years ago. I was billing $350 an hour.
Jesus.
An hour. And if it was special, like top secret, that was $500 an hour. Because with that, you can't do anything. You read it and that's it, and you have to forget it. You can't, all that material, you can't memorize that. All that medical stuff. Just getting the language right for the pharmaceutical companies. Like for Pfizer, I did some things. And it was very, you have a producer there. It's very taxing. I produced an audiobook for a client in New York. I was his producer. He wrote a book called, look it up, Socratic Selling. Great guy. That was an audiobook we did. We did it at the General Electric Studios in Fairfield. And I got to do another one in New York City in a studio where Bon Jovi played. Well, Bon Jovi recorded. And it was with, who wrote Paper Tiger?
Jeez. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Sorry. Yeah. Now it's.
The author of Paper Tiger.
Tom Quinn.
So I was his producer in a studio in New York, and I'm like, oh my God, he was one of the required readings in high school. Now I'm in front of him between glass, and he's reading this. Now and he screws up, I have to tell him, Cleo, go back, you have to be straight-faced. When I was at Channel 5 in New York, there were people I had to produce a segment. And there were these big Wall Street guys would come in, and all these people in the studio. I was just a kid, what do I know? I don't know who they are, and I didn't care. I had to do my job. And so I would go back, and I'd be in the booth, and this guy and he screwed up, and I clicked down, and it boomed out into the studio. It said, I said, Felix, we gotta cut that, we gotta redo it. He goes, thank God somebody's listening, right? He respected me for that, for correcting him so he didn't look like a jerk. So, but everybody else was always afraid because he was this big money guy in Wall Street, and that they didn't want to hurt his feelings. So they didn't say anything. No, you don't want somebody, whenever I do interviews, no, we'll stop the mayor, the former mayor of New Haven. He had a terrible speech problem. John Williams. He couldn't put two words together, hemming and hawing. So we had to edit all that to make him sound better. But you interview people, you want to put the best of the story together. You don't want to get their flaws and things like that. I mean, unless it's warranted, unless the story warrants it. But you're trying to get the information that they're saying. That's key. And you want that to get out right to help tell the story. Not expose their flaws or anything like that. Boy, I never talked about that before. Yes.
Kind of a cliche question, but do you have a favorite story you've?
Oh my God, I get asked that,
I know.
I think, every story, people come up and stop me. Be funny, I'll be shopping at Big Y or something. I'm like, oh, you interviewed me in 1991 and blah, blah. No, some stories I'll remember. I'm like, oh yeah. And then I'll tell them a segment of that and they're like amazed. But there are others who come up to me, oh, I met you, like, okay, where, when? If I do 2-3 stories in a day, in the course of a week, but in the course of 48 years, it's like, oh my God, you're talking thousands of people. Bill Clinton, I interviewed when he was running for president. Asked him, okay, did you and Monica Lewinsky get it on? And he was like this to me. He said, I did not have sex with that woman. It was like that. He was like, okay, and what am I going to say? Oh, no, you didn't. It's like, no, and we were that close. And, became the president. Jimmy Carter I interviewed. Walter Mondale. Oh, so many. Politicians, celebrities, became friends. Oh, here's a good one of my favorite stories. Dr. D, David Schultz. Look him up. Dr. D, David Schultz, WWF. Still a friend to this day. If you ever get a chance to see a story by John Stossel of ABC's 2020, he did a story in 1986 about wrestling being fake. So David at the time, working for Vince McMahon, WWE, Vince told him, if he asks you if this is fake, you know what to do. Well, David's contract was up. And David said, well, he's not going to know me anyway, so he was getting on in age. But this was 1989. He boxed in John Stossel's ear. John said, well, I think, this is all fake. So David, with his cupped hand, took him out, boxed him one side of the ear, knocked him down. He stood up, took him down the other side. But David never knew John Stossel had an inner ear birth defect. So he had ringing in his ears years later after that. So fast forward from 1986, 1989, I get a call. You ought to do a story on this guy, David Schultz. And find out he is my first cousin's next door neighbor in Woodbridge, Connecticut. And they're friends. So my cousin introduced me to him. At the time, David was a bounty hunter. David would go out, he would go all over the country, finding bad guys. They skip their bond, their bail. Now the bailsman is out of the money. Maybe it's $100,000. They put up $10,000. So David would go out and find those people and bring them back to court. And if you look up bounty hunters, they have free reign to do almost anything. So before the Supreme Court ruled that we cannot follow bounty hunters into homes because we're not licensed to do that, you know, and puts ourselves in danger. But we went in. We go in New Haven, 5 o'clock in the morning. They would break in the door. You know, he had a handgun or 2 or 3. David was this bigger than life character. If you see on the wrestling, that's one of my favorite stories. And we did a series on bounty hunting, and he was into fast cars, and he was just a big old Southern boy. So part of the story we did, you know, we got into the character of of course, you have to tell the story about his background, right? And knocking John Stossel out, and that he works out. He is an extreme athlete. No, these WWE guys, they work out. They have to be super athletes. So I played racquetball a lot of the time. So did David. I've never seen anybody hit a racket ball so precise. It's so hard it sounded like a shotgun. Anybody ever play racquetball? You hit it with the racket. The ball's about this big. It's rubber. He would hit it 1 inch off the forward wall. Of course, it would bounce right here, and you connect. There's no way you're going to get it. He would hit it, sound like a shotgun, and almost destroy the ball. Every time. And I thought I was good. Oh man, I sucked. It was bad. And so we played a lot. It was fun. He always won. But we got into that, and we went into the ring in Orange, Connecticut, where David practiced. And he taught students who want to be wrestlers, professional wrestlers. So we worked out weights and stuff. I at the time I was 35. I was in good shape. And David gave me such a workout. I've never been in so much pain the next day. It was horrendous. I'll tell you later. But he was a lot of fun. We're still friends to this day. He wrote a book. I read the book. I was trying to get him publicity on to do more of the book, but he's still out there, still having a lot of fun. But he's a member. It's a member. No, because a lot of times you become friends. You know, lifelong friends. There's still people I still maintain contact with. You know, I bet you. Oh, we did a joke. Was it Chaz and? Yeah, it was Chaz and AJ. Anybody familiar with WPLR? Chaz and AJ. Morning. So we set it up. Oh no, Jim and Shelley. In Hall Communications.
Okay.
Jim Lane and Shelley. They were doing this thing about 3 months ago about wrestlers, you know, old time wrestlers and coming in. So I called David and said, "Hey Dave," I said, "tomorrow you want to do a goof?" They had people trying to mimic old time wrestlers on the radio as a shtick, right? So I figured, let me see if Dave's up to it, and if Jimmy Lane, the morning host, can guess who this is. So I was in the studio that morning, purposely. It was just before vacation, and I set it up with Jimmy, but I didn't tell him why I was there. And we were set to call at 7:30. He calls in, and David's trying to guess, and David's just doing his old Dr. D shtick, and Jimmy didn't get it. and then it wasn't until he was off the air, he goes, "That wasn't David Schultz." I said, "Oh yes it was." And he said, "Man," he goes, "I wish I knew that." And I told you. but it was fun. David's a fun guy. Never cross him. We went into the Bronx one day, 22 stories up in this hellhole of an apartment complex to get out a bad guy and bring him back. That you know, you go in these halls, you know, smell of urine, and to get a bad guy out and bring him back to Connecticut. Yeah, that was before Bounty Hunting, the TV series, was popular. We were trying to do that at Sonlist, but the Sonlist decided not to pursue it because it's too dangerous,
Mhm.
liability issues.
Mhm.
Other questions?